another discussion about the heaven and hell and stuff. I didn't catch the beginning of it when you said whatever you said about what your belief was about hell.
Hell is the grave.
Hell is the grave. But you don't believe that God sends anybody to hell?
Well, no. I think when we die, we all go to hell.
Oh,
because again, the word hell did not appear in the English lexicon until in the late 1500s, and even as we have people today that are named Clark here in this country, in England, a clerk is what we call a clerk. We have people named Coopers, and because those were people that by tradesmen who built barrels. We have people who are named Baker today, and their trade was bakers. See, men, by and large, did not have last names. You were George the Baker, or you were George the son of Bill, or whatever, until Napoleon came along. And Napoleon came along and said, wait a minute, we got a real serious problem here. We can't go through life this way. So he mandated that all men in his kingdom anyway, and all families, were to take a first and a last name, a given name and a surname. Multitudes of these people, as it went on to England and other cultures, simply took the name of their craft. Now, in England, prior to the time of all of this happening, the crafts had very strong, if you will, unions. And the bakers and the clerks and the coopers and on and on and on. We have multitudes of people named after the trades that their original families came after. Now, what with intermarrying and cross-cultures and whatever else, of course, that has become severely diluted. And others took the names of their clans, or others took the names of their countrysides, or whatever that they wanted to do. All right. Now, when we get in, and so I tell you all of that to tell you about the fact that there were people who practiced their trades and their crafts and whatever, and people who went around in the countrysides and other places and put on thatched roofs for houses. They were called hellers. And this again is where we get, as we get multitudes of our phrases from various and sundry things, this is where we get the term that I'm going to go out and raise the roof tonight, or boy, she was so mad, she was so ticked off, she raised the roof. And we have cleaned it up by doing that. And many times you have heard the saying, boy, if you do that, your old lady's going to raise hell with you. Well, where do we get the term raise hell? Well, it comes from raising the roof, if you will. And hellers were people who put on roofs. Now, the simple definition of their name meant to cover over. And when you go to hell, as biblically referred to, David speaks about my soul being in hell, thou art there. In other words, even in the grave, God is cognizant of me. He is aware of me. Doesn't mean that I'm aware of him, because David said, he didn't say anything about, I know you're there, but he just simply said that you know where I am. So when you get down to the nuts and bolts and you go back and trace the word out, do a word study on it, the word hell simply means to cover over. So when you die, they're going to put you in a casket, they're going to go out and they're going to dig a hole, and they're going to put you in that hole, and they're going to cover you over. And you at that point will then be in hell.
Okay.
Hell is the grave, nothing more, nothing less. Now people mix it up with Gehenna, and they mix it up with the lake of fire. But the two are not the same.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that the English translation of the Bible had a lot of misrepresentations in it.
There's not so much misrepresentations. They shaded it. When the Protestants translated the Bible under King James, or Prince Jimmy, James VI of Scotland, James I of England, they weren't satisfied with a lot of things the Catholics had in their Bible, and they didn't agree with it. So they shaded a few things, but I don't believe that God has allowed his word, if indeed it is his word, I don't think that he's allowed it to become polluted.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but they got some. I've heard that the best way to do it, if anybody can do it, is go back to the original Greek, Roman, Latin, and whatever else it was written in, and translate it back from their modern day times. To some of the more modern translations are better to read than the old King James Version.
Well, what you have to understand is that the King James is a translation,
right,
which came out of the original Hebrew and the original Greek.
Right.
And many of what you have today are simply what they call versions. Now, a original, the version is something that somebody has taken and they have brought it into modern English out of one of the old translations, and they have added or colored or whatever else. Most of the versions that are out there, I wouldn't have in my house.
Okay. Do you know if there's any newer translations of the older manuscripts?
There are two that I would recommend to people. One is easy to read, but however, it is not. None of these are in the Elizabethan language, which is so easy to memorize. That's one of the reasons why the King James, to this day, is the largest selling Bible that we have, is because when it comes to memorization and everything, the lyric, the rhyme, what's the other word I'm looking for? But anyway, it is so easy to memorize it. Now, you get into some of the other versions and translations, and they are much more difficult. Zondervan puts out one called the Amplified Bible. And as far as the entire Bible is concerned, I think it is one of the finest study Bibles that you can possibly get your hands on. When it comes to the New Testament alone, J.B. Phillips translated the New Testament, and he also translated the book of Hosea and the book of Psalms, some of the Psalms, into modern-day English, and it is a very strict translation, and it is very easy to read, but again, for memorization and quoting, it is more difficult. Now, if you want probably the most accurate verbal translation that you can possibly get, although it is extremely difficult to read because people who are used to reading the King James are used to reading some of these ones that we have out today. There is one that is put out by, I don't know who the publishing house is, but the Bible is the Farrar Fenton, F-E-R-R-A-R, Fenton, Fenton. Fenton was an individual who lived in England in the late 1800s and translated it, and he spent over 50 years reading just the original translations in the Greek and in the Hebrew until he became so conversant with it he could then translate it over into English. And but again, his is except for serious students, it is difficult to read because again, it does not have the lyricism that the Elizabethan language had for the King James. I don't know whether even bookstores around here, for the most part, carry the Farrar Fenton because it is it's not that popular for that very reason. I have it as a study. But as far as sitting and reading it and whatever on a constant basis, I don't. I usually read the Amplified or I read J.B. Phillips for the New Testament. And those are two of the most accurate, in my opinion, that are there. Although some of the footnotes in the Zondervan Amplified, I don't fully agree with, but that's negligible, that's small, that's nothing to get excited about.
Yeah. Because way back when I was in high school a long time ago, I had Latin, and I know from that some things in one language are real difficult to translate into another language because the ideas and the words and the way they're put together just don't translate well.
Yeah, the shadings and the meanings and things of this sort. And again, you go back to the ancient Hebrew. There were no periods, there were no commas, there were no question marks. And many of the prophetic books were not written in the chapter breakdowns that we have them. That was all done at a later time for convenience of reading and also for location so that you could go back and you could find things and refer to things, and people could pick up their copies of it and find what you were reading or what you were discussing or whatever. And until the Gutenberg press came along, we didn't even have these things that were written basically in book form as we have it today. There were some portions of the Scripture that over the years, as they were translated by the monks and by the clerks and by people in the monasteries who made these copies before the printing press, movable press came along, and on occasion, they would add little things, or they would decide, well, that's not exactly the way this ought to be, or that doesn't line up with our doctrine or whatever, and they would make little shadings or little meanings or little whatever. But as far as it being grossly in error, it is not. There are people who sit around all day long and try to prove that the Bible contradicts itself. But when you take it in context and you take it from the beginning to the end, there are no contradictions in Holy Scripture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the contradiction stuff, I heard something a long time ago that's very interesting. That until somebody explains to you sometimes, something can seem like a contradiction, and it is posed in the way of a riddle. And it goes, there's an object in the world that's hot and cold, hard and soft, and black and white all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And for as many years as I've been telling this, I've never had anybody answer me and figure out what it was until you tell them, and then all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, you know. And so I tell them, I said, well, if anybody tells you or says, you know, this is a contradiction in the Bible, until it's explained to you, you know, or you know, if you take the whole thing or whatever, it can look like it is, but it isn't, you know.
So what's the answer to your riddle?
It's a hot touch Sunday.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Anyways, nice talking to you.
All right. You bet.
All right, thank you.
You bet. We're going to pause for a moment, and we have all kinds of lines available.